often in our culture and mainstream allopathic veterinary medicine, we're very quick to put an animal down. It's like, oh, if they've got a diagnosis, put them down. Well, what we have to look at is truly the quality of their life. And there are signs and symptoms that we can discuss. But the other side of this spectrum is that we wait too long and they're in pain for too long. So what we want to find is the middle of the road. And there are a couple of indicators that over all these years of working with animals and helping people with senior animals and actually working with animals in hospice to make them as comfortable as possible for weeks or months leading up to the transition, there's certain patterns that we do see.
This is True Voice Unfiltered, the podcast where raw truth meets real transformation. I'm your host, Daria Anne, ghostwriter, content strategist, and holistic health warrior. No, I'm not a doctor, nurse, nutritionist, or any kind of medical professional, and this show does not dispense medical advice. I'm just an informed patient sharing what I've learned on my own healing journey. I also interview accomplished authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, and functional medicine practitioners who are transforming lives. If you're ready to break free from the sick care system, reclaim your health, and transform your life, you're in the right place. Let's get unfiltered. Hi, Debbie. Welcome back to True Voice Unfiltered.
Hi, Daria. Good to be here.
Well, I'm so grateful that we decided to do this recurring series, Debbie, because there's so many topics concerning our pets and their health that we really need to delve into. And one of them, unfortunately, and what we're going to talk about today, is compassionate euthanasia, something I have been through recently. And I feel like we could help a lot of people by just sort of exploring this topic and offering some guidance and even some comfort through that whole process. So I guess my first question would be, like, what are the signs? How does someone know that their pet is moving in that direction where they may need to use compassionate euthanasia?
Right. And you're right. This is a very, it's a broad topic. There's a lot to look at, but in essence, it is finding the middle point between, often in our culture and mainstream allopathic veterinary medicine, we're very quick to put an animal down. It's like, oh, if they've got a diagnosis, put them down. Well, what we have to look at is truly the quality of their life. And there are signs and symptoms that we can discuss. But the other side of this spectrum is that we wait too long and they're in pain for too long. So what we want to find is the middle of the road. And there are a couple of indicators that over all these years of working with animals and helping people with senior animals and actually working with animals in hospice to make them as comfortable as possible for weeks or months leading up to the transition, there's certain patterns that we do see. I'm going to talk about one extreme to the other. Now, an animal could have a diagnosis or even be in a circumstance where maybe they've lost the use of their hind legs from an injury or from an accident. Some people would automatically say, put them down. It's not always the animals. They still sometimes want to be here if we can find ways to let them fulfill their mission and their purpose. And it's really about reading the animal. And here again, it can be very hard to be objective. We're very subjective because the bond. We're so close to our animals that it is really, at times, hard to read our own animal at that time because our emotions are absolutely connected to the outcome or this animal's destiny. So one of the main signs, though, is when they stop eating. When they begin to choose not to eat food. That is probably one of the biggest signs. But the other thing that we have to watch out for that is that sometimes, and we'll talk about cats here for a moment. It could be a dog too, though. If they have a dental issue and they are older, or maybe they have another health condition, if their teeth are sore, if there's a painful tooth, they won't eat. They can look depressed, and it can be read as that they're getting ready to, we need to help them pass on, when it was just a dental issue. So, there's a lot of fine lines in this, because I've seen multiple issues occur towards in the senior days, or maybe an animal has multiple conditions and there's just something that's up front and center, even a digestive issue where they may not be eating because they have a tummy upset because it's caused by food or something else. So in those instances, we wouldn't just use food as the indicator. We would use things like, if we know that they're in pain, we can see a dull look in the eye or a depression alongside maybe a journey of an illness, and then they have transitioned to not eating. That is usually one of the greatest indicators that it's time that we need to help them make the transition, or sometimes that they end up transitioning on their own, in the night, or and I've seen that before too, where they actually had a very peaceful transition at home. So
Yeah.
having said that, please dive in and ask me specifics or questions around this, because there's a lot to it.
Well, yeah, Deb, I want to ask you, is it true? Because I believe sometimes animals, they don't want to let us know if they're hurting or they're sick. Because you mentioned, like, you notice it in their eyes and other things. Because I've found, I mean, I've had many dogs and cats that especially dogs, they seem so eager to please you that they don't ever want to let on that they don't feel well. So what are some things that people should really be looking for?
Okay, we definitely have some other signs here. Um, because animals do love us so much, and they're, in essence, they are our caretaker as well. They have trouble leaving us behind unless we help them along and tell them that it's okay, and really have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. Um, it can be a little vague, meaning, well, are they doing this for me? Are they hanging on for me? Am I not seeing, the look in the eye? So one of the other indicators, and this is a really, really big one too, is they start laying in different positions in the house or outside of the house. They start seeking out areas where they normally don't hang out. That's a natural, animals in the wild do that. When they're getting ready to transition, they will seek out a spot that's usually some a little bit hidden, or a little bit, um, maybe not where their normal areas would be. And so a lot of people see that too. They're like, they're kind of laying in different spots in the house, or they're laying under that. That's a prime indicator too, that they're nearing the time when they're saying, my mission is coming to a close here.
Yeah, I know with my dog, with Willow,
Uh-huh.
towards the end, I would say within the last 2 weeks, she started sleeping on the floor next to my bed instead of on my bed. And that was one of the things. And then the other thing she did too, and it almost seemed to me like she was becoming uncomfortable in her own body. Like instead of laying her paw flat, like on the ground or front, she would do this, like
Right.
against the ground. I don't know if you could see what I'm doing.
I can. It's a
Yeah.
neurologic thing, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
is that because their body's kind of getting in that process of transitioning? Why does that
well,
happen?
that could have had with Willow, that could have specifically had to do with what was going on with her body,
Yeah.
uh, in particular. That isn't always a sign that their body is starting to let go. I mean, usually we'll be able to tell by behavior and stopping eating, because
Yeah.
sometimes it can be weeks where they may not eat as much as they used to eat, but they're still eating. And it may be a half or a quarter of what they eat, but they're still eating. And it's usually when they stop altogether, like a 24-hour going into 48, that's like, okay, this is a clear sign. So it really depends on the condition that the animal's dealing with. And I think she may have had some neurologic stuff, but normally that isn't always seen in all animals when they're getting
I see.
ready.
Yeah, I think for me that was another sign because she never did that before. And then like
Right.
sleeping on the floor instead of wanting to sleep I mean, I slept on the floor with her like the last week that she
Absolutely.
was here. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, I've had cats that I slept on the floor for a week next to the carrier, and yeah,
yeah, and and it's so true though what you said because for me when she stopped eating and drinking, I mean because she
and
went through
drinking.
this that's how I knew she was sick because she was drinking excessive, drinking water excessively and then all of a sudden that stopped and she didn't want to eat and Willow loved to eat like most dogs, right? I mean, she will,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I was just like, "Ooh, okay, I think I have to make this decision." But, I think for me, I struggle with it. I'm sure other pet owners struggle with this. Like, am I doing this too soon? Am I waiting too late? Um, have you run into that
Right.
with other people, with other pet owners?
Definitely. I mean, this is a huge, and this is why sometimes it's also really helpful to have a holistic practitioner. I actually don't know of a lot that do this. Um, I do, but I will hold the pet owner's hand through the process, meaning by the signs and the symptoms, what they're describing. We make them as comfortable as possible till it's clear. I mean, if they're in pain, if they're whimpering, if they're um, most people really do know. They really do know when their animal's in pain. I mean, when it gets to this stage, sometimes in the early stages they do not know, but of course that is another major indicator. I mean, you may even have an animal that's continuing to eat that is still in severe pain, and there's no natural alternatives to use anymore. You can only use, drugs for so long before the liver overloads. And then that creates another problem as far as pain, because pain is another big one that we have to look at and say, how much pain are they in? And they will tell you. They will tell you. They will be depressed. They will be lethargic. Um, they won't want to do even normal things that they used to do, even in a compromised state. It starts reducing. And so, but then you have the other side where they're not in pain. And you would think this animal shouldn't be here because of a diagnosis when they're clearly saying, hey, I'm not done. I still feel good. I'm engaging with you. I'm eating my food. I'm drinking. I may even be playing to the degree that I can play. And so there isn't just like one sign that it's not black or white. It's really evaluating each situation for what it is. But there are general guidelines that we all just need to be aware of so that we can determine, is my animal telling me I want to stick around? My job's not done yet. And will you support me in that? Because it's a commitment, you know? Or I need to go, but I need your permission. I need you to tell me it's okay, and you're going to be okay, and I can truly let go. And on that note, I want to introduce the idea of flower essences, because they can really help this transitional journey, both for the pet owner and for the pet itself. And of course, it doesn't change the circumstances, but it changes the fear around it. It can change the fear for the animal, but for the pet owner as well. The animal feels the fear of leaving because they're feeling their pet owner's fear of, oh my God, what am I gonna do without my beloved being? And so flower essences, and we can go into specifics about that later, but there are things to ease this whole transition and process right up until the moment that they actually transition on their own, or that we have someone come in and assist with that, or that if we have to, that we take them, you know, to be passionately euthanized.
So these flower essences, Debbie, is this aromatherapy or is it something that you ingest? How does that work?
They're drops.
They're drops. Okay.
They're drops. And I'm gonna give you one example. Something like now we make all of these at Happy Tails too, but a lot of people are familiar with the Bach flower essences. They come
Yes.
okay. So
Yes.
Bach flower essence, this is what we're talking about is flower essences. Um, just one off the top of my head is aspen or mimulus. These are both for fear. Fear of the unknown and fear of the known. One is aspen is for fear of the unknown. Mimulus is for fear of known things that you know but you're still afraid of. But transitioning, there can be both. There can be fear of the unknown and there can be fear of the known, both for the animal and the pet parent. So these are just drops, little drops that you can administer. You could even just pull their lip down and drop a drop on. Very easy to administer. This is nothing that is invasive. Very easy to do, and helpful little tools along the way.
Yeah, and so that helps calm the animal down and their human down, I take it.
Absolutely,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah, many years ago, I used to use Rescue Remedy. Back in the day, I mean, I've been over it for many years, thankfully, but I went through a bout of panic and anxiety disorder, and that
Yes,
was really, really helpful. The
yes.
Rescue Remedy by Bach. Yeah, I
And
used to use
that
that.
one is 5 blends, and it covers a lot of different things. Obviously, you experienced it. You know, these are how powerful flower essences can be, and they're
Yeah,
really wonderful for this stage. Um, I make a flower essence blend called the Gentle Passage, and this can be used for weeks leading up to that. Almost help prepare the pet, but the pet owner can use it with them, so they're on the same frequency level,
yeah,
and it can just help with the sadness, the fear, everything that comes with time when
yeah.
it's time to let go of our pets.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough, and I mean, I struggled with that. Am I doing it too soon? Am I doing it too late? In my case, though, I was really concerned that I just didn't want her to suffer, and I think that's how most pet owners
Absolutely.
feel. And it was just, the vet had warned me that there was a potential that she could go into multiple organ failure, and like that was the last thing I wanted to happen at home with me not
Right.
really being able to help her, and I just didn't want her to suffer. So I didn't have enough time. I mean, if really my preference would have been to have somebody come to the house, but
Right.
unfortunately, it's crazy. I called all these different places and they were all booked. Like, I think this was a Wednesday and they were all booked until the following Monday. And I thought, I don't think I have enough
Wow.
time. I can't
No.
do that. So I ended up taking her. I do have to say that my vet had a wonderful area set aside, a room, even a separate entrance, thankfully. Like, we did not have to go in the main entrance of the.
Yes. Yes.
It's like a separate entrance. And what I did first, and hopefully I can get through telling this story, but Willow loved the beach. That was our thing. We would go to the beach every weekend and she would run around and play the dog beach, and I would let her off the leash and all the other dogs would be off the leash. And they were great. All the dogs would just play together. And Willow was a great swimmer. She loved to body surf. So my friend came with me, my friend Deb, and she said, you're just like, why don't we take Willow to the beach one last time? And the vet just happened to be across the street. So it worked out well. And so we took her there and it was time. I mean, I'm glad I did it. So she had her time at the beach and then we went in a separate entrance and they did have this lovely room and it had a closed door, door that you could close. They let me stay. They were like, take as much time as you need. You can sit with her for as long as you want. And I did for a while. And
Right.
then I got to a point where you feel like you just want to, it's got to happen. And then I'm like, I just need to rip off the Band-Aid, as bad as that sounds. But
Right.
it was just prolonging, I think, the agony for both of us. So they took her back. Now they heavily sedated her and then they brought her back in and I was able to
Yes.
hold her and they let me play music and it was very considering the circumstances, I think they did a wonderful job. I mean, but I think if I had had my way, I would have preferred to have somebody come to the house. So what are your thoughts about that, Debbie,
My thoughts about
with the
that are with
animals?
particularly with Willow. her whole scenario was fast. I mean, when she first started acting different in December, then things progressed fast. And then from the time
Quickly.
that you
Yeah.
had gone to the vet to where almost overnight she literally took took a dive and you didn't have time. So it doesn't always happen this fast. And there is a little bit more time to maybe have someone come, maybe use some things to help with that transition. But she gave you the clear signs immediate. You knew the signs were clear and it was immediate and you took the appropriate action. So that is, I think you handled it the best that anybody could. And I think that it sounds like your vet, was very compassionate and um, took care of you, meaning having a separate entrance is wonderful because you don't want to stimulate the dog with all the noises and the sounds and the other dogs and the people talk. It's already such a sensitive moment. So I think you couldn't have had a better scenario than you, because that's what it called for. That's what it called for in that moment. And it was so fast. But I would say for people that have more time, really the ideal thing to do is to have someone come in, because the animal can let go easier. They're in their environment. It's just like us. Where would we want to be? Would we want to be at home, or would we want to be, if we had to be, at the vet? But I think there are a lot of services now that do come into the home. And, unfortunately there was a wait on your end, and maybe everything happened just the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
We have to take that into consideration as well, because that's a very important piece. But it's
Well,
a wonderful option to explore ahead of time. Like if your dog is in hospice care, or it's an elderly dog, whichever the situation is, you can call in advance. You can know where you're gonna want to call when the time does come, and have a few things lined up, because it's hard to do that in the emotion of the moment.
yes.
And sometimes we don't have the time to do it, and sometimes we do. So if we do, that's a great way to pre-plan a little bit
Yeah,
and find out
absolutely.
what's available in your area. Even though you'll never know the moment, because it could be 24 hours. It's like, okay, now the time's here. And those places, they know that. They're usually, but just depends on their load too, and timing.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, it was kinda sad to me that I'm like, "My gosh, are that many animals passing that you're booked until Monday?" It was crazy, and I just wanna say the vet was wonderful. I mean, she was going through the same thing with her dog, who was in their
wow.
final days, and she wasn't even supposed to work that day, and she's like, or it was her lunch hour, and she said, "You know what? Come in at 12," because she was booked the rest of the day. She's like, "Come in at 12."
Right.
She's like, "I would rather I'm here for you." So, really, I have to say, kudos. It's Aloha Pet and Bird Hospital. They were wonderful. And even after it was over and I sat there with Willow for a really long time afterwards, and then somebody knocked on the door just to check on me, and I
Right.
started crying. And he said, "We don't want to leave her alone. You let us know when you're going to leave, and we'll make sure somebody comes in here and sits with her." And so,
Right.
even though it worked out that way, I think, they did a wonderful job. And either way, I would have been a mess like I still am now. But one thing I want to talk about, Debbie, too, though, that I think is very important, and,
Yes.
I wrote a whole blog about this, is that you have to be with your animal till the very end. And it makes me really sad when I read stories from vets about how people just drop them off and leave. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm just going to say, okay, your animal has been your devoted companion. They do more for you than you will ever know. They help heal you. They take on energy. They bring harmony. They do so much for us. And at minimum, at minimum, if we do take them in, it's really our duty to stay with them, to not have them be alone in these last few moments when they've served you for however many years. Um, treat them as you would want to be treated. Would you want to be dropped off at the vet? And I hear of this too, Daria. People say, well, it's just too painful for me. And I'm like, well, what about all the years of service that your pet has served you? And let it be a closure, and a beautiful closure for them, but for you, see them off to the very end. And it's not that they are eternal being. So are we. But through this human physical process, hold their hand, hold their paw, stay with them. I mean, I think that's a given. We need to honor them in that way, and never just drop them off and hand them over.
Yes. They do so much for us, and it's so
Oh my
unconditional
gosh.
that I think it's the least we could do. Like, I would never, I don't know how anybody could do that. I mean, Rosie was my dog that I rescued before Willow. And unfortunately, she got violently ill. I won't go into the whole story, but basically she died on the operating table. I didn't have that opportunity, like,
Right.
to be with her at
Yes,
the end. And it always bothered me. And then, of course, I went and sat with her afterwards, but
of
it always
course.
bothered me that I wasn't able to really say goodbye to her. It was just, everything just happened so quickly. That seems to be the pattern here. At least with Willow, I don't have to live with the guilt of thinking, wow, I should have stayed with her. Like, she knew I was
No,
there. I knew I was there. And
it
yeah.
was a conscious choice, and you were conscious about the whole process. And I too, many years ago, I had a cat die on the table, and here I was trying to do everything I thought in my toolbox at that time to help my cat and to potentially prolong its life. It was not an emergency situation. It was just a tooth extraction, but nonetheless, their body couldn't handle it, and that was it. And I think a lot of us have had similar circumstances, but in a situation like that, we don't have control. We do not have control over it. Um, but something a little esoteric to remember is that we can communicate with our animals no matter what. Like, if they have to go in for a procedure, um, with a lot of prevention, we try to avoid having emergency procedures these days. But if that has to happen, we can be with them when they're on the table. And I think very few people could argue how intuitive animals are. I mean, things have been recorded for years of animals know when when their parents are coming home. They
Yeah.
know. They have cameras in the house. The animal knows,
Yeah.
minutes in advance. And I mean, it's no different when they're being treated, or they're in a situation where they're having a procedure done. We can actually be with them simply by thinking of them, knowing this is true, and communicating with them, and supporting them energetically. So,
That's wonderful. Now, I have a question, Debbie, too. Like, with people that have young children, so let's say they have a pet that they have to compassionately euthanize.
right.
Do you have any thoughts on how somebody can explain to their children what's going on in a way that the kids can understand? Because we know the bond between kids and animals is a strong one.
Absolutely. And here again, I think it's very important for the children to see the process, because it's also accepting that this is part of life. And in compassionate euthanasia, it gives the child or children and the animal a chance to be together through this process. It completes the grief process for the human. There isn't this feeling that's even unconscious guilt, like, oh my God, we just dropped them off, and that was it. I mean, a child can go through the same thing, even though they don't have the words to articulate that. So I think it's, even though they can cry, and I mean, children are wiser than we think. They really are. And if we just tell them the truth, being truthful, you know, our dog, whatever the name of the dog is in pain, and it's time for them to go. Children get it, but they also process their emotions, and we can't be afraid of that. We can't be afraid of oh, they're upset. Well, they need to process that rather than carry that with them into adulthood and the rest of their adult life as some unconscious thing that, you know. So in my perspective, I feel that it's really healthy to just tell the truth and let the kids be a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Ideally at home, but sometimes we can't always do that. So
yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, you don't want to rob them of that chance to say goodbye and be with, and also give comfort to the animal and vice versa during that moment. I guess I hate the word closure, but it gives them
it
just what
is.
you described.
It
Yeah.
is. Absolutely. Even if there's upset and tear, there should be. It's a letting the emotions flow through. Definitely.
So Debbie, have you ever had a spiritual experience with an animal during euthanasia? Because you and I both, we're on the same page. I agree that we are all spiritual beings, and that includes animals. So I was just wondering if you ever had an
Right.
experience that really validated that for you.
Um, so as far as during the actual process, I, of course, with my own animals, but I have been part of the process for a few other clients. What I can say is that the way that my spiritual sight works is that I have a sense of knowing or a feeling. I don't get a lot of like images of seeing energy, but I can sense the energy and I can feel it. And so, I mean, I would say about a year ago, I was part of a process for a client, for her German Shepherd, Vivian. And I was there through the whole process. The vet came out to the property and, I sat with her and I held her paw and I held her head and I could just feel, I could feel her lift her soul, lift out of the body, and there was no fear. It was planned. It was, she had a lot of support. Um, and I could feel her make the transition and it was peaceful. It was very peaceful. It was beautiful. And, so in that sense, yes. Now I've also had spiritual experiences with my own animals after they transitioned where they came in and they began to teach me things. And a lot of that has been part of the Happy Tales protocols and the way that we use frequency medicine and such, frequency blends. And so I also had some spiritual teachings about the earth plane and the heavenly plane and letting go of certain things here. So I've definitely had the animals come back and teach me things. Um, I used to have one that she was a guide. She was a cat, and she would be in my body work sessions. And this
That's
is
amazing.
back when I was doing body work, and I had a couple clients say, if they're face down, um, they thought I was at one end of the table when I was at another end of the table, and I couldn't be at both places at the same time. So logically, they went, "I thought you were down at my feet," and my hand was actually up on their shoulder, and so absolutely. I mean, they are here. They do not just when they die, they do not go away. They have a soul. And we actually really can communicate with them anytime if we just settle into that place. But what blocks that is the belief that we can't because we're not trained and we're conditioned not to believe our intuition and not to believe a lot of things that are our natural inherent birthright. So we can tune into them anytime.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I know. I rejected this from an early age, but I went all through Catholic school and was told that animals don't have souls. And I said, nah, I don't believe that. They have souls.
I had the same experience.
It's like,
Exact same experience. So
that's so funny. Yeah, I think it's universal, probably. We could probably go down a whole rabbit trail about that. But yeah, I was just like, no way. I remember my cousin and I, we were like 7 and 8 years old. We're like, dogs have souls, cats have we don't believe that. Animals have souls. We just decided we were just going to reject that. But you're right, it's really true. And I find it really comforting and to know that you could communicate with them at any time. And what a beautiful
Absolutely.
story about Vivian. I love that story that you could feel her just rising.
Yeah, and you know what? Because we're on this topic, she was an example of she was 14 years old. She'd had a lot of health issues, and the ironic thing with this is that I worked with Vivian for a number of years, and as she got older, I mean, 14 is old for a German Shepherd, a
Oh,
big
yeah.
German Shepherd. Her health improved, her her cognition, her presentness all improved, except the hindquarters were starting to give out just physically. It wasn't caused by uh, a disease or a physiological imbalance. And it was just at this point where she was even comfortable. I mean, she would lay in the sun and she loved her food. You could just see it. But her owner couldn't carry her around anymore. I mean, it was just, it was just to that point where it was physically impossible, and yet she didn't have to be s see, she didn't have to be so uncomfortable. She went when she was actually in a physiologically and a mental state of positivity, but the physical body could no longer get around, and, so she was, it was very peaceful, and she knew it was gonna happen. Her owner talked to her and said, "Okay." First, she gave her the signals, but, there was communication, there was preparation, there was love, there was a whole circle of people, her people, and, yeah, we were all with her, and we could well, I could feel her, her soul rise, and it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect for everybody, for her, and, it was time to let go, and it was time for her to move on to her next journey.
Hey everybody, it's Daria cutting in here. So Debbie and I had some technical difficulties during this interview. I'm actually amazed that we were able to capture as much as we did. And thankfully she's a recurring guest. So when I bring her back, we're going to pick up with some of the final questions that I asked her. I started to go into rescue dogs and their amazing resilience. I follow a lot of rescues online. I support them when I can. And it always amazes me to see a dog that has come from such a horrific abuse situation still wagging their tail when they see their rescuers, no matter how starved or beaten or mistreated they were. And Debbie sort of accredited that to the spiritual nature of animals to fulfilling their purpose on earth. So we're going to ask her about that in our next interview. And I also want to revisit the idea of spay and neuter. As I said in this interview with her that unfortunately got cut off, I'm all for spaying and neutering. I understand why we do it, and there's so many, sadly, just so many homeless pets due to breeders and due to the lack of spay and neuter. So I'm all for that. My concern is doing it too soon, and in my experience with adopting my dog Charlotte, I couldn't take her home from the shelter until they spayed her, and she was only a year old. And I suspect she might have even been a little bit younger, but I just think a year old is kind of young. And so I asked Debbie about that question. How old should they be? Does it throw them into menopause? And she did mention that yes, it can, and that at HappyTails.tips, her website, there are homeopathic remedies you can purchase to, again, like sort of mitigate the bad effects of the hormonal imbalances that the dog would experience from the spay surgery. And I plan on getting that for Charlotte. So I just wanted to jump in and mention what happened because it was a great interview. Unfortunately, we were having some technical difficulties. I'm glad I was able to capture most of it, and that's what was left out. For whatever reason, you could hear me, but I couldn't hear Debbie's answers, and her answers were not recorded. So when she comes back for the next interview, I'm going to pick up with those questions because I want her to share that information with you in her own words. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Hi, I'm Dr. Liz. I just want to tell you how amazing and easy it was to work with Daria on my book. You see, I've had a book for a while, been sitting on my desk, sitting on my computer. Maybe you might be able to relate to that. And I didn't know what to do, how to take it to the next step, how to make it look polished and edited and easy and useful for my readers. Met with Daria. We had some great conversations. She learned my voice, my goal, my style, and she was able to edit and give me feedback on how to make my message clearer, more focused, polished, and it worked. I have a book. In fact, I have a book and a workbook that she's edited for me and guided me along the pathway. So if you're maybe a little bit like me, that you have a book or you have an idea and you haven't known where to take it, how to take it to the next stage, reach out to Daria. She's a game changer and she's really easy to work with and takes great pride in her work as well. So join me in the published author arena. Reach out to Daria. I'm Dr. Liz.